We took him to a psychiatrist, and within a matter of minutes, yeah, she's ADHD, and here's your drug.
Went on the Medicaid, and 5 minutes later, he was on Zyprexa.
He saw the psychiatrist and prescribed the medicine for 20 minutes.
The guy didn't even look at her. He talked to her a little bit. Now, how can you tell if somebody's ADHD or not ADHD from just a few minutes talking to her?
Next thing I know, I'm getting handed a handful of Xanax. That's how easy it is to get these drugs. Just so easy. It was just passed to me like candy. That simple.
If a person were to walk in off the street, sit down with a psychiatrist, the chances of him being prescribed a drug before he were to leave the office, I would have to put it at 100%.
Psychiatrists prescribe drugs. They might have different ways of diagnosing, they might have different ways of interacting with a patient, but it's rare to find a psychiatrist that uses no drugs.
The psychiatrists today are, in quotes, admitting they can't cure these mental illnesses, and they're therefore going to manage your illness by using a drug.
50 years ago, a person who was going through a divorce would have relied on family, friends, clergy, and even the family doctor to a certain extent for conversation to work through the issue. They certainly wouldn't have been medicated.
To bolo pred érou psychotropných liekov. Psychiatri, nachádzajúci sa na najnižšej priečke medicíny, pôsobili takmer výhradne v ústavoch pre duševne chorých. Bez liekov mali veľmi malú šancu, že by ich verejnosť či ich kolegovia kedy uznali ako skutočných doktorov.
Psychiatrists had for years been on the fringe of medicine. Typically, the standard doctor internist would have very low regard for psychiatrists because it was understood not to be a very clear science or art.
Psychiatrists wanted to be viewed as physicians, as doctors. And in order to be viewed as physicians and doctors, the people they dealt with had to be viewed as patients. And if doctors dealt with diseases, then their patients had to be diseased.
Psychiatrists had a wonderful opportunity, they felt, to become respected in the eyes of their peers. They raced to create a whole diagnostic book called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which was created by consensus.
A group of psychologists and psychiatrists get together, and if they have made common observations, they have a vote and they now classify a new disease. And they give it a number and it graduates into the DSM classification.
And it's a dangerous book. It's a book that has many disorders that could apply to any one of us because the disorders are not real medical diseases. And it's things that apply to nearly all of us at times. Are you afraid of meeting new people? Are you afraid to speak in front of a large crowd of people? Does it make you nervous to go and to talk to your boss about a complaint?
You can invent a mental disorder based on a checklist of symptoms, and that is exactly how the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the billing Bible for psychiatry, works.
Od prvého vydania DSM v roku 1952 počet diagnóz neustále narastá. Z útlej 130-stránkovej brožúrky so 106 tzv. Mentálnymi poruchami sa DSM nafúkla na objemných 886 stránok. Práve vďaka tejto knihe môžu psychiatri diagnostikovať, vydávať lieky a účtovať si za svoje služby. V skutočnosti psychiatrický priemysel dnes využíva DSM na to, aby vyzbieral vyše $72 miliárd od súkromných a vládnych poisťovní.
The DSM is used to diagnose and then give a label, and the label is used for billing purposes. That's how they get paid.
You have to have a term in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual in order to then call it a disease and treat it as a disease and write a prescription for it.
And so because they can vote it in, they can create, and then the drug industry can just take over and market their drugs for those new disorders.
And those drugs were welcomed by psychiatry leaders because it made us real doctors.
Of course, first the public had to believe that there was something wrong with them and that thing wrong was biochemical and that could then be treated by a drug which was supposed to cure all.
And so it was relatively easy, I think, to say, well, look, let's start looking at mental illness as fundamentally a matter of chemical imbalance in the brain.
Chemical imbalance is a term that's used as a marketing ploy, as opposed to anything that there's scientific evidence to support.
Nobody has yet measured, demonstrated, or created a test to show that somebody has a chemical imbalance in their brain. Period.
How do you market a drug that restores the chemical balance or corrects a chemical imbalance? How can you do that in good conscience if you don't even know what one is?
The whole myth of the chemical imbalance was created to sell drugs.
A zatiaľ čo psychiatri a farmaceutické spoločnosti využívajú tento mýtus na miliardové zárobky, dopujúc tela nič netušiacich spotrebiteľov obrovskými množstvami psychotropných liekov, je to verejnosť, čo platí najvyššiu cenu. Približne polovica všetkých samovrahov v USA je na psychotropných liekoch. Odhaduje sa, že ročne psychotropné lieky zabijú 2,5 krát viac ľudí, než je počet obetí vražd. A komu je zverená ochrana verejnosti pred týmito nebezpečnými psychotropnými liekmi? V USA je to správa potravina liekov FDA, ktorý poradným výborom pre psychiatrické lieky dominujú psychiatri, ktorí striedavo účinkujú vo farmaceutickom priemysle, v akademickej obci, súkromnej praxi a vláde. Hovorí sa tomu turniketové dvere.
The revolving door at FDA is one of the primary reasons why the system that we have works so poorly. That revolving door is a direct result of the fact that a group of people with the same mindset are put into positions of being regulators and in the position of being formulators and sellers and marketers.
The panels that are formed by the FDA to evaluate these drugs, the psychiatrists who are on those panels, almost all of them have conflicts of interest where they have directly or indirectly received funding from the very industry and the very parties within the industry whose drugs they are evaluating.
So there's this tight little relationship between psychiatry, pharmaceutical industry, and FDA where they each mutually support each other, and yet the mental health of the population does not improve.
Vezmite si napríklad výbor FDA na vyhodnocovanie liekov, ktorý schválil antidepresívum Paxil. Každý psychiatr v tomto výbore má finančné väzby na farmaceutický priemysel. A tieto konflikty záujmu boli tak bezúzdné, že podnietili vyšetrovanie americkým kongresom.
When I check these advisory committees who make recommendations to the FDA, and they're always approved after the advisory committee, I found that there were conflicts of interest. I found that many of the people on the advisory committees had never filed a proper report on stocks and bonds that they owned that might be viewed as a conflict of interest, and they're by law supposed to do that.
A táto sieť finančných konfliktov záujmov medzi psychiatriou, farmaceutickým priemyslom a FDA sa ešte umocnila po schválení zákona o poplatkoch užívateľov liekov na predpis. Tiež známy ako PDUFA. Podľa tohto zákona by FDA mala dostať poplatok $100,000 za liek, aby zaistila, že psychotropné lieky rýchlo prejdú schvaľovacím procesom a stanú sa dostupnými na predpis rýchlejšie než kedykoľvek predtým.
Congress told the FDA, your job is no longer to make sure drugs are squeaky clean safe before they get out on the market. Your job now is to hurry up and get new drugs on the market faster.
It acted to set the priorities of the FDA so that if there was a fee paid for a particular drug approval, it could be put on the fast track and rushed to market with less than the usual scrutiny that the FDA would give it.
A toto prednostné vybavovanie vymenilo bezpečnosť za predaj. Od schválenia PDUFA čas potrebný na vyhodnotenie lieku poklesol z obdobia takmer 2 rokov v roku 1992 na pouhých 6 mesiacov po 4 rokoch. Medzi tým sa počet nových liekov vydaných pre verejnosť dvojnásobil. Hoci je toto prednostné vybavovanie katastrofálne pre bezpečnosť verejnosti, pre psychiatriu a farmaceutický priemysel prináša obrovské zisky, pretože čím skôr je liek schválený, tým skôr zarába peniaze. A ide o veľké peniaze. Každý deň priemerný psychotropný liek vynáša v hrubom vyše $7,7 milióna. Jeden z týchto liekov, Zyprexa, nás hrňa denne takmer $12 miliónov. Aj keď FDA teraz účtuje vyše $1 milióna za žiadosť o nový liek, farmaceutické prednostné vybavovanie to nejako nespomaľuje.
If you look at the relationship between the FDA, the pharmaceutical industry, and the psychiatrists, there's some kind of game that they're playing there. And what is the game? Well, you could say it's money, definitely money.
And when you follow the money, you realize that there is no money in health. There's big money in disease.
That's why all you hear about is managing disease or treating disease. You don't really talk about curing disease.
And so psychiatrists have become mainstream doctors in America. And that is because of the pharmaceutical industry. They can thank the pharmaceutical industry because they become mainstream and because they have a lot more money than they used to. And the drug industry can thank them because now they have thousands of soldiers in their army distributing these drugs to everybody.
Od najmenšieho dojčaťa po najstaršieho dôchodcu nikto nie je imúnny voči akejkoľvek zo stoviek fiktívnych porúch vymyslených psychiatrami, ktoré poháňajú multimiliardový priemysel psychotropných liekov. A deň čo deň rozhadzujú psychiatri svoje siete ďalej a ďalej. A čo jediné je k tomu treba? Ďalšiu psychiatrickú nálepku.